Hello everyone, thank you for joining us here at the Beatles Story. I'm Nick, and come and join me on an incredible musical journey where we'll learn everything about the Beatles. Let's get started. It was autumn 1965, and the Beatles had taken just 3 years to conquer the world. Everyone had heard of the Beatles, and everyone, it seemed, loved them. However, John, Paul, George and Ringo were growing restless. The Beatles may have been the biggest band in the world, but there were constant pressures. Touring in America, where they had played to a record-breaking 55,000 fans at Shea Stadium in New York City, making films like Help, which they completed earlier that year, not to mention the constant demand for new songs. They'd already made one album that year, the soundtrack to Help, but their contract required another album in time for Christmas 1965, and it was already October. However, the Beatles had one massive thing in their favour. They were the Beatles, and therefore ridiculously talented. The band somehow managed to absorb all that was happening in the 1960s and then wrote about it. John was an avid reader, and his songs on Rubber Soul reflected this, becoming more literary and complex. Paul was consistently fizzing with musical ideas and took a strong interest in the London art scene. George Harrison developed a deep interest in Indian music and spirituality, and Ringo was the skilled drummer and served as a steady presence within the band. Additionally, contributed some of the lyrics to Eleanor Rigby. Another significant influence on Rubber Soul was America. The title Rubber Soul was a typically Beatlesque play on words. When Paul McCartney recorded the song I'm Down, he muttered the phrase plastic soul, referring to soul music often performed by white singers, which was sometimes viewed as lacking the authenticity associated with black American soul musicians. The Beatles were strongly influenced by soul music, and Rubber Soul included elements that reflected this influence, particularly from artists such as Aretha Franklin, Smokey Robinson and Otis Redding. The impact of soul music could be heard in the tracks like Drive My Car, You Won't See Me and The Word. Paul McCartney's bass playing is bouncier and more propulsive, as is Ringo's drumming, while the backing vocals on the album are rich and soulful. In addition to soul influences, the band was also affected by their interaction with Bob Dylan, whom they met while touring in America. The meeting proved to be fruitful for both parties. The Beatles loved Dylan's poetic lyrics and folk singing, while Dylan loved the Beatles' ability to write insanely catchy, guitar-driven pop songs. Following their meeting with Bob Dylan, an interesting thing happened with the Beatles. Dylan abandoned his acoustic guitar for an electric one and began writing guitar-driven pop songs, while the Beatles started writing more folky and poetic songs, like Norwegian Wood and Girl, both of which appear on Rubber Soul. Along with their exploration of soul music, the Beatles also contributed to a more reflective folk rock sound. John Lennon produced some of his most notable writing on Rubber Soul, particularly with the song Nowhere Man. According to Lennon, he wrote it to reflect his dissatisfaction with fame and the world around him. According to Lennon, he was unhappy at the time and felt that fame had created a sense of alienation from the world around him. According to Lennon, he'd been up all night trying to write a song when he wrote Nowhere Man. But he finally gave up and lay down, and he said the whole song and words and music came to him. He said the whole damn thing just came to him like in a dream. The song was melodic in structure and featured distinctive guitar tones. However, Lennon and McCartney were not the only members of the Beatles writing songs. George Harrison had been composing music since 1963, beginning with Don't Bother Me for the With the Beatles album. By the time of Rubber Soul, Harrison continued to develop as a songwriter and contributed 2 songs to the album. If I Needed Someone was one of Harrison's compositions, influenced by the American band The Byrds, while Think For Yourself was a Bob Dylan-influenced rock song. One of the most well-known tracks on Rubber Soul, and one that anticipated the direction of later albums such as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, was In My Life. The lyrics were primarily written by John Lennon, while the tune was composed mainly by Paul McCartney. The musical style of the song drew inspiration from soul music, particularly the tracks of My Tears by Smokey Robinson, whose work had influenced both Lennon and McCartney. The lyrics for In My Life came to John Lennon after the British journalist Ken Alsop suggested that he write a song about his childhood. John agreed and composed a song that reflected on his early years in Liverpool, one that remembered lost family members, friends and past relationships. He later described In My Life as his first major piece of work. The song went on to become one of the most widely recognised tracks in the Beatles catalogue. With Rubber Soul, the Beatles turned a huge creative corner. They moved beyond their earlier image as performers of catchy pop tunes and began producing music that was richer, more complex and sophisticated. Following the release of Rubber Soul, other prominent bands of the time, such as the Beach Boys, the Rolling Stones and the Kinks, responded to the album's artistic direction. Even highbrow music critics started to take notice of the Beatles. Remarkably, the Beatles completed the entire recording of Rubber Soul in just 4 weeks. Their next album, Revolver, was recorded only 4 months after Rubber Soul and took approximately 8 weeks to complete. At the time of its release on the 5th of August 1966, many fans were still processing the musical and lyrical developments of Rubber Soul. Some music critics later regarded Revolver as more influential than Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, while others suggested that its impact laid the groundwork for bands like Oasis and Blur. Music critic Ian MacDonald wrote that in creating Revolver, the Beatles had initiated a second pop revolution, one in which, while galvanising their existing rivals and inspiring many new ones, left them all far behind. The release of Revolver marked a point at which critics and listeners began to evaluate the Beatles' music with greater seriousness. Some critics even argued that their work could now be studied in the same context as classical music or fine art. Revolver opened with Taxman, a song written by George Harrison. Harrison wrote the track after learning that due to the band's financial success, he and the other members of the Beatles would fall into the top tax bracket and be expected to pay up to 95% tax on a portion of their earnings. Taxman marked the band's first overly political song, referencing both the Labour Prime Minister Harold Wilson and the Conservative leader Edward Heath. Another notable track on Revolver was Eleanor, Rigby, written primarily by Paul McCartney, with significant contributions from the other members of the band. George Harrison provided the refrain, "Look at all the lonely people," while Ringo Starr contributed the lines, "Writing a sermon that no one will hear," and "Darning his socks in the night when there's nobody there." The song reflected the growing interest among the Beatles in addressing themes related to isolation and society. Structurally and lyrically, Eleanor Rigby bore similarities to poetry or literary narratives, incorporating elements more commonly associated with storytelling. Eleanor Rigby marked a significant departure for the Beatles. It featured no guitars or drums, only a string quartet, which was arranged by producer George Martin. Building on Paul McCartney's Yesterday, Eleanor Rigby demonstrated the Beatles moving popular music in a new direction. By this point, critics had begun to pay closer attention to both the music and the lyrics of the Beatles. One notable aspect of Revolver was the wide variety of musical styles it included. Here, There and Everywhere was a love song written by Paul McCartney, while Yellow Submarine was a song aimed at younger audiences and performed by Ringo Starr. Love You Too, written by George Harrison, showed strong Indian musical influences. Nearly every song on Revolver differed stylistically from the one preceding it. The final track on Revolver, Tomorrow Never Knows, held particular significance. It was primarily written by John Lennon, with key contributions from the other members of the band. He drew inspiration from books on Eastern religion and philosophical concepts of reality, such as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. John was keen to describe his thoughts and feelings about transcendental literature and reality in sound and music, even if that meant pushing the boundaries of what music could do. Collaborating with the other Beatles, particularly Paul McCartney, who had a strong interest in experimental music, Lennon, the other members of the band, and producer George Martin incorporated techniques such as tape loops, reverse guitar recordings, and lyrics inspired by a sacred Buddhist text. John stated that he wanted Tomorrow Never Knows to sound like monks chanting on a mountaintop. In 1966, Tomorrow Never Knows differed significantly from anything previously recorded. Tomorrow Never Knows has been recognised as one of the most innovative pieces of music to emerge from the 1960s and continued to influence later artists, including Oasis and the Chemical Brothers. Revolver has since been regarded as one of the most highly acclaimed albums in popular music. Some critics have assessed it as being better than Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. In Rolling Stone magazine, writer Rob Sheffield stated that Revolver captured the Beatles at the peak of their powers, competing with one another because nobody else could touch them. He referred to it as the best album the Beatles ever made, which means the best album by anybody. Why not step into the world of the Fab Four at the Beatles Story, an exhibition dedicated to the Beatles? Discover their journey from Liverpool to global fame, featuring immersive exhibitions and rare memorabilia. Experience the magic, music and legacy that changed the world forever.